Hello and welcome everyone to the Australian Small Business Podcast powered by Happy HR, Australia's #1 HR resource. I'm here with Chris Smith. Chris, good morning.
G'day Julian, how are you today?
Very, very well, thanks. Always waking up to some new developments in what is going on in the world in regards to this COVID pandemic and how it's actually affecting small businesses here in Australia. And once again, the screws get slightly tightened, which means that business owners need to be a little bit more savvy.
Yes, absolutely. They're certainly going through a lot of pain right now, and certainly in Happy HR, we've been really helping people to make right decisions, and they should be getting advice around their employees and what their obligations are at this particular point in time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And while it is a painful time, it doesn't mean that it needs to be more stressful than it needs to be, because I think a lot of people have angst around the fact they don't know what they need to be doing. And of course, that's what this podcast is for, is to give small business owners the education and confidence that they are doing everything that they can to keep their business sustainable. But not only that, but have the knowledge and strategies in place for the business to really take off once things
Absolutely
get better. So today we are talking about redundancies. It's something which a lot of businesses, unfortunately, are facing right now, and even more so their employees, purely because the business needs to reconsider, what is necessary within the business and so on. So, just for those that are new and didn't listen to the last episode, Chris, quite simply explain to me and the listeners what a redundancy is.
Absolutely. Redundancy, in simple terms, is someone who's probably doing an okay job in your business, but at this particular point in time, the business needs to remove that position from the business because of financial means or because there's a change in direction or business rationale in the business. So it's a mechanism for a business to remove a role from a business for the reasons I just mentioned.
So it's got nothing to do with the person. It's just simply that this role, this salaried or wage role that is a cost to the business, just is not necessary.
That's correct. Exactly right.
So it's one of the things. It's not you. It's the role. It's not me. It's you. It's the role.
That's correct. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So essentially, when can someone? If a business owner may be thinking, when can I make someone redundant?
Yeah. Look, I think it comes down to any time you can make someone redundant. At the end of the day, the business, if that role is no longer required in the business, then obviously the business owner, director, manager needs to make that call. So all based on cash flow or business rationale reasons, if that doesn't add up or stack up, then you may be forced to do redundancy. And again, with redundancy, you need to do always the right thing that's required by the Act or the award.
Now, just to make it very clear, and this is something that we've discussed before and catches a lot of people up, if you are making someone redundant, it's truly that position is gone. So you can't tell someone that they're redundant and then hire someone else into their position, can you?
That's correct. If you do that, that's an unlawful or constructive dismissal. And if you did do that and got caught, the Commission certainly does not, the Fair Work Commission, certainly does look not favourably towards business directors and owners and managers that do that. So you really, if it is a genuine redundancy, that's what it should well be. That's the mechanism, redundancy.
Yep.
And you need to do the right thing.
Yeah, that's so important. We see a lot of people get caught up with that. Now, a lot of times we've spoken to people this week where they do need to implement some redundancies in their business, but they're struggling to really decide who goes. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of mixed feelings, and it's hard to sometimes just take emotion out of it. But I guess, what are some things to take into consideration when you are looking to make someone redundant or a position redundant? Is it someone? Does it matter? Like, is it one employee compared to another one? Let's say they're both in a sales role.
Yeah.
You've got Jeff, who's been in the business for 10 years, and you've got Tom, who's been in the business for, let's say, 11 months. Both are past their probationary periods. Is it just, they're both the same, I should just make one of them redundant?
Redundancy is strategic. So it comes down with redundancy to do it correctly. Let's say, for example, I've had lots of conversations with people this week about this. Your analogy just now is a really good one, because you've got someone that may well have lots of leave entitlements and so forth. And at this stage, cash flow wise, you can't get rid of that guy who's been there 10 years. And an example I got given from a client this week was Johnny, who's been there 11 months, is an absolute gun and he's doubling everyone's sales. But John, who's been there for 10 years, is not performing as well, but I can't afford to get rid of him right now because his redundancy payout or his long service leave or his other entitlements I can't afford right now. So the financial decision is actually the guy who's been there 11 months, even though he's performing better. So that was with that particular client a real heavy heart because he's found a great salesperson, but he can't afford to keep both. But financially, it makes sense with cash flow to remove the younger buck.
So that's somewhat, I guess, counterintuitive to what a lot of people think. You keep the great guy, and to be honest, I would say that's what a lot of businesses would be doing. And like, we get it. I mean, if you find a great performing person, you do want to do all you can to keep them. But if it's going to be at a significant cash flow loss to your business right now, unfortunately, it may not be the smartest decision.
Exactly right. You need to look at and weigh it up. How much time has John got left? Can you is there a provision to stand John down? What can be actually done? So, in regards to redundancy, it does come to sequential order. I was working with a retail group yesterday, restructuring their organisation chart, looking at who needs to stay, who needs to go, and the decisions were all based on financial. None of it was based on the performance, which is really counterintuitive. And I gave the advice on if you can keep the good people, when you come out of this, you'll be in better shape. But the reality for this business is if they don't make the necessary moves now, they won't have a business. So they've had to make the decisions based on financial, which is gut-wrenching for the medium-term strategy of that business. So, it's really hard to give advice because obviously keep the good guy, obviously, because when you can't, we all come out of this and we will come out of this, guys, but it's the business needs to be there at the end of this, and that's the hardest thing for business owners to deal with and grapple with right now. And that was a really tough call last night.
So it's a bit of a
last night really tough.
As much as we're all going through short-term pain, but even with that staffing or resourcing choice, it's really a short-term pain for a long-term gain. So there actually is a long-term for the business.
Correct, exactly right. And that's the decision you need to make as a company director. And as hard as that is, and I say, as you know, Julian, we're in the fair business, not the nice business in HR. And sometimes you have to make those calls based on strategy, and it is strategy. Redundancy is part of strategy. Don't make emotional decisions with redundancy.
So speaking about strategy, I guess some other things to consider when it comes to choosing who you need to make redundant. Sometimes you need to look at the skill set of the team as well. So let's say that, for example, you have two employees who have, let's say, similar entitlements. So letting either or go is probably going to be about the same end result for the business. But I think it's important sometimes to look at these employees and consider, well, what other skills do they have? If we actually do need to reduce down our overall staff group, do they have any other skills that they can bring to the table? So, for example, we were speaking about this the other day. Let's say we're still talking about salespeople. You've got two equally performing salespeople, but one of them is really good on social media and technology. So maybe in a time like this where we need to go a bit more online, that might be the right person to choose.
Absolutely. So that comes down to, I always say in this environment that we're in, we start with cash flow forecasting and you do your cash flow forecast. Then you structure your bandwidth around driving sales and retention of clients. And then from there, you tie in your strategy. Now, that strategy conversation is, okay, in a reduced capacity, I may have an employee that may need to take on extra duties because I'm going to restructure my org chart and give them additional KPIs during this time to not only keep them employed, but also help the business get through this period. So the analogy of a sales guy that can also do some marketing and structure, your CRM and do EDMs or electronic digital mail and really start driving awareness and all these types of things, that employee is going to be much more valuable than someone who can just sell. So, of course, you need to look at the positions, restructure that position. At that point, you may make someone redundant, then give someone a new position with new KPIs and make that person aware you've been retained because of these additional skills that you've got. So, a really great point you bring up. So, it's really important to look at how they add value to your business culturally, because culture is king. From there, what skill sets they bring to the table, additional skill set. And then from there, what can you do to maximise their productivity in the role that they've been doing for you? If you can look at that as a strategy, that's certainly going to help you in these times.
Right. Okay. So a lot to think about, but I think that if people just spend a little bit extra time with this, it is going to pay dividends for them and increase that sustainability, which is what we're all about at this point in time. So if we make a role redundant, just out of necessity right now, things pick up and we need to rehire for this salesperson or this admin person and so on. Is there anything we need to take into consideration? Do we have to offer it to this person first? Now, they may be a gun person. You want to pick them up again straight away anyway, but are you obliged to do that, or do you just advertise the role?
It comes down to the time frame between the roles. So, a general rule of thumb, generally speaking, is if you make a role redundant and let's say 3 months later that role becomes available and that person's been generally a good performer, you should contact them and say, hey, would you like to come back, right? They may be in a position where they'd love to come back, and that's the right thing to do. And you need to look at the provisions in your redundancies and your awards.
And let's be honest, if you've already trained them up.
Yeah, 100%.
If you get someone brand new in, it's still going to take them a while.
Correct.
But if we're moving into greener pastures now and we've got someone who is already trained up and they can hit the ground running, and they've got runs on the board, why not?
Absolutely right. So I would always be saying, if you made them redundant and they can come back, then let them know that if a role does come up or this role does come up again, you're going to contact them and have that honest conversation. If they've been awesome for your business, you just unfortunately had to make them redundant. That's the actual circumstance. Then why not bring them back? If the role's been made redundant, and redundancy is important where, let's say, for example, they've got a role, and let's say it's an admin role, and that role's been absorbed by the business, and then all of a sudden 3 months later, you relabel a role as a similar role. That's not lawful to do that. So you have to be very careful on how you remove people from the business. There's a lot of people that try and do that. It's just wrong. You can't do it. If you get caught, the commission will have something to say about that. So just be careful with the way you restructure roles. But if, again, in this situation, you made a salesperson redundant because business can ill afford them. If greener pastures, as you said, comes in, Julian, get them back in. And, it's great to bring good people back in who've added value to your culture. Why wouldn't you not bring them back in?
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, you did have that conversation about saying, okay, you might say to them, well, if we'd love to get you back in and so on. Should you make promises to people?
No, definitely not. You should say, look, you would love to get you back in, but, you may, if it's generally you love that person, they've been awesome for you, and it's really, really heavy heart, you let them go, they're obviously going to be your first point of call. If they say yes, then it's great. But you shouldn't make promises because, you might structure that role based on the economic circumstance. You might go, okay, I need a salesperson, but now I need a salesperson that can also do this. So your structure or strategies might change. So just be careful with the promises you make.
Especially in times like this where you may make promises with all the best intentions in the world, but when things change, they change.
Yep.
So the last one I just want to touch on, Chris, is can you make someone redundant just because you want to save some money?
Well, yes, absolutely. That's the purpose of redundancy. So, at the end of the day, if saving money means, and let me qualify this, if you've done your cash flow forecast and you realise that your EBITDA or GP is going to be lower than the business's or what the business requirements are, and you need to save some money going forward because you don't know what the future is going to be, then yes, that's a genuine redundancy. You're in your rights to do that. But again, if you do that and then just rehire just for the sake of, that is not genuine, and so you need to be careful there.
Okay, wonderful. Well, hopefully that gives the listeners and small business owners here in Australia a bit more clarity around redundancies, and this will help them to make decisions in the coming days and weeks a little bit easier. But of course, I know that Happy HR is really opening up their support lines to all small businesses at the moment if they have questions and queries. I believe you mentioned before the podcast that you're happy for people to email through questions in detail so you can help them as best as possible, and one of your qualified HR consultants will get back to them. How should they contact you?
Just simply, I'm getting a lot of people emailing, so just simply email help@happyhr.com.
Fantastic. Now, while they are looking into shoring up their HR processes in this time, because as we said, now's not the time to be making mistakes, there's a free risk assessment report on the website. And from what I understand, it's a questionnaire. People will just fill it out, and they will actually get a detailed customized report to their inbox explaining their current health of their HR, the risks that they have, but most importantly, how to fix them. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Again, a lot of people filling this out. I really implore you to go to the homepage, click on the orange button and fill this risk assessment out. It'll tell you about your HR health, and it'll give you really good actionable steps on how to resolve these things in your business. So great document. The PDF is awesome, and it'll really help you to understand where you're at.
Because I think that's the big one that we've just uncovered now, is that a lot of small business owners right now don't know what they don't know, and they are making or potentially making huge mistakes that could be fatal to their business.
Yep, that's why we created that risk assessment, so people can go online, find out where they're at, and actually do something about it.
Fantastic. Well, visit happyhr.com to fill out that risk assessment. If you need some help during these turbulent times, please email help@happyhr.com. But until we speak to you next time, please make sure to subscribe to this podcast. Visit us on LinkedIn and Facebook at Happy HR, just to make sure you are staying on top of all of your obligations as a small business owner, so that not only can you survive, but once we get through this all, you can thrive. So Chris, thank you so much.
Thanks, Julian.
And we'll speak to you again.
See ya.
Thank you.